Namaskar, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today, I am absolutely elated and privileged to have Pithawalla sir with us. Sir is an advocate, solicitor, author, and the senior most professor of law at Government Law College, Mumbai. He has been teaching at GLC for the last 5 decades, and his students include Supreme Court and High Court judges, solicitors general, advocates general, politicians, lawyers, and academicians across the world. And as you all are aware, that the purpose of this podcast is to inspire our budding lawyers to strive for excellence and be more socially aware and responsible citizens. And I would like to share a small anecdote over here with Sir's kind permission.
Sure.
Um, Back in 2015, when I was the General Secretary of Srimati Vinta Devi Tope Social Service League of Government Law College, we had organized a blood donation drive. And to encourage students to participate in that, we used to go to different classrooms and make an announcement about the importance of the drive. And when we reached room number 11, the it was completely jam packed and students were sitting till outside. So we knew that sir was taking a lecture in that class, and sir was kind enough to allow us to make an announcement in the class. But to our surprise, sir even came to the auditorium to see how the drive was going, and he volunteered to donate blood, knowing fully well that he didn't fall within the eligibility criteria because of the age. And we were so happy that time, and I think the response was overwhelming. So this was done just, so that students are inspired to do something good for the society. So I'm very happy to be doing this episode, and welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So the first question is, what motivated you to pursue law? And if you could share some of your memories as a law student with us.
Yeah, but before I go to that, can I comment on two things which
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned? It is 49 years. Okay. So one more run to go before the half century. And about the blood donation drive, yes, I did volunteer, and it was not just to show off or anything. And I have still not understood why they do not accept blood from people who are over a particular age. I mean, I've argued with them. I said, I've got good hemoglobin, I've got my blood, just take it. If you don't find it good, throw it out. But they seem to think otherwise. Okay, back to your question. See, the education system in my days, when I say my days, it means more than 50 years ago, was quite different because we finished school after standard 11. There was no standard 12, there was no junior college. And today it is 12 plus 3 for the graduation. In those days, it was 11 plus 4. So ultimately, it would come to the same thing. I was in a Jesuit school, or school run by Jesuit priests. So I decided that St. Xavier's College would be the best, also run by Jesuit priests. And of course, I was not interested in science or commerce, but we had to have a BA, BCom, or BSc before you could join law. So I decided to go for BA, which would be 4 years. In the first 2 years, you do general subjects like English and logic and history and civics. But in the last 2 years, you have to specialize. I'm talking of those days. And I could choose between philosophy, psychology, English, history, ancient Indian culture. I thought psychology would be the best. So my last 2 years were spent in studying psychology, which has helped me even today. I may mention that if a student in those days wanted a BA with honors, you could write BA into bracket honors. Then you had to take all 8 papers in psychology. Otherwise, people took 6 papers and 2 in some other subject. Now, all 8 papers in psychology was reserved for only 24 students in the whole college. And I think I was fortunate to be one of them. On the side, I may mention that out of these 24 students, 22 were girls. Okay, so I was in good company. And I had a very good teacher, professor, who was a Spanish gentleman, Jesuit priest. And of course, I always wanted to do LLB, but I had to do my BA also. But this gentleman kept on trying to talk me into taking a career in psychology. He said, you do your MA, then you may do your PhD. And frankly, I was not interested. And today it's a little different, but I think in those days, there was hardly any scope for a psychologist. Schools and colleges never had psychologists, even multinationals did not keep one. So I told him that, and yet he just kept on. Of course, he was looking at my interests. If I may use the language of the Contract Act, this would be Section 16, undue influence. And another thing which mattered to me, which is so insignificant as I look upon it, but to me at that time it was very significant, was that all the MA classes would be at Kalina. And I hated the idea, Monday to Saturday, travel all the way to Kalina and all the way back in heavy rains and heavy sunshine, etc. So I said, no, I'm sorry, I will do my law. And he also felt a bit fluttered and frustrated. And I remember his words. He said, if you do law, I would regard you as the biggest waste of intelligence which I've ever seen. Anyway, he was entitled to his own opinion, but a very, very nice man. So at that time, JLC was the best law college. Even today it is, despite it going down terribly, but still I think they are better than other colleges. And the principal of JLC was Dr. T.K. Tope. Believe me, before admitting us, he interviewed each and every student. He explained to us that this is a college where we believe in discipline. And in those days, the LLB course was 2 years. And we were the last batch. Now, you might feel that this was a very nice thing, finishing off your law degree in 2 years. But imagine the subjects which we did not study. There was no company law in the syllabus, no CPC, no CRPC, no Evidence Act, and thank God, no labor law. So we became lawyers without studying all these subjects, which I find very surprising. But Dr. Tope was, as I said, a very strict disciplinarian. And he was a genius in 2 subjects. He used to teach us also Constitution and Hindu law. He even wrote a book on the Constitution, which I used not only for the LLB, but also for my LLM. And he was a towering personality. You know, you have to look up to talk to him. So we would regard, I mean, he did not inspire any feeling of fear or anything like that, but we were all awed. And he used to come in a full suit every day to teach us. And in those days, the principal's quarters were on the topmost floor of the GLC building. There was no new building, it was just that old building. And he had a very interesting habit. I think when he was a little bored sitting in his room, he would walk along the corridors and near the canteen and catch people who were bunking classes. And of course, he would take action against them. And I once remember that it was the last lecture. And as usual, the professor didn't turn up. It used to happen in my days also. When we went, the professor didn't turn up. When he turned up, we were bunking. So everybody else said, no, this is the last lecture, we are going home. But I said, no, I have some work in the library. So everybody went off. And as I was going to the library, I stopped at the notice board to read some notices. Suddenly, there was a tap on my shoulder. Principal Doctor. He said, young man, you should be in your class. Give me your name, class, division, and roll number. I said, well, I will definitely and gladly give you all this information. But can I please tell you that we all went to class, waited for 20 or 25 minutes, but the professor did not turn up. Oh, he said, then don't give me that information, give me some other information. Give me the name of that professor. And I'm sure that he must have taken some action, because today, once last year I was climbing the steps with a student in the morning, and there was quite a bit of dirt. And when we saw this, I remarked to him, I said, look, now, we didn't have a principal for the last 12 years. I said, there is no individual in the college who is bothered to see if the students are coming, if the professors are coming, and even if the sweepers are coming. But as I said, attendance was paramount. And I remember one small incident. My parents wanted to go for a short vacation, 7 days, and I refused to go with them. I said, if I'm 7 days absent in GLC, Dr. Tope will never allow me to appear for the final exam. You go, I will stay on my own. They said, no, then we cancel the vacation. We don't want you to stay home. And then a friend of mine, when he heard this, he gave me a brilliant suggestion. He said, why don't you approach the principal and directly ask him for 7 days leave? I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So I wrote a small letter to the principal, and very nervously, I went and I gave it to him. He just kept on looking at the letter. No, yes, no, no. And I got more nervous. Then suddenly he said, come and see me after 2 days. And I said, fine. After 2 days, I went back. Now, what do you think he had done in those 2 days? When I went back, he said, I have checked your attendance. It's extremely good. I have checked how you have done in the previous exams. Very well. So he wrote okay, and he signed it, and he said, please go out and give it to the attendance clerk. We had a separate clerk for attendance. And I may tell you that we had to do 8 subjects. There was no semester system. We had to appear for all the 8 subjects in April, in the first year and in the second year. Around Diwali time, little before or little after, we had the terminal exams. And around February, we had the prelims. And both the exams and your attendance would decide whether you were allowed to appear or not. Today, I think if the 75% rule was observed, now the 75% rule has been made by the Bombay University, not by us. I think if we applied the rule today, not one student would qualify from the whole college to appear for the exam. Mind you, I was going for 7 days and I needed permission. Today, I know people who are living in Delhi with their families, working in law offices in Delhi, and they are our students. They come to Mumbai to fill in the form to take the exam. So this is the vast difference between those days and today. One thing was common. The canteen was hopeless, as it is today also. So we had a very nice Udupi restaurant just across the road. You know where Burger King is now, there was a South Indian restaurant called Satkar. Gave excellent idlis and masala dosas. So nobody would go to the canteen. We would go there. Or we would go to one more place, but with a little hesitation, the Jai Hind College canteen. You know, we had to be careful that nobody would catch us and say, oh, but you're not from Jai Hind. Now, I'll tell you my encounters with 2 subjects when I joined. Contracts and torts. Both were in the first year, as it is today also. When I attended the first contract class, believe me, I'm not exaggerating, I could not understand anything. And the only 2 words which I could comprehend were promisor and promisee. Now I said either something is wrong with me, I can't understand, or something is wrong with the professor, he cannot explain, or something is wrong with the subject, it's a hopeless subject. So I said, let me take the first presumption that it's my fault. And I kept on attending for the second time, third time, and still I could not catch anything. Believe me, I came to the conclusion that contracts must be the worst and the least interesting subject of all. Then we had the terminal exams. As I told you, we had to appear in the terminal exams. And each and every professor had warned us not to use something called the Jhabwala guide. It was called a guide. I don't know. And being a very obedient student, I bought mullahs for contract and Ratanlal Dhirajlal for torts. When I started reading contracts, I said, what is this? This is perhaps the most interesting subject. And I'm telling you this because apart from the subject itself, I think the professor makes a difference, which should not be so. Anyway, so then I developed an interest in the subject. As far as torts is concerned, Ratanlal Dhirajlal is a big fat book. So, you know, pages and pages on, say, injuria sine damnum and damnum sine injuria. And I said, I'm not going to write all this in 25 minutes. So what to do? I got this idea. I said, I'll summarize Ratanlal Dhirajlal. And it was very time consuming. Painstakingly, I did 3 or 4 chapters. And I said, I'll do the full book. Then I'll put the book aside and then I will study only from the notes for the exams and from the book for knowledge. As this was happening, I was sitting in the class one day, and the boy next to me had a Jabwala tots. Out of sheer curiosity, I said, let me see, everybody is condemning this book and saying it's a guide. Let me see, and let me see the same chapters which I had made in my notebook, spending hours and hours, believe me. And what do you think? My notes and what I saw in the Jabwala was almost the same. Almost the same. So I said, if somebody has taken this trouble, why is this book being condemned? And one of the reasons I found out later was that the professors did not want us to read from Jabwala because they were preparing our lectures from Jabwala. So this was, I mean, somehow no Jabwalas in the library also. In fact, there was an interesting incident in KC Law College, where also the Jabwala is banned. So one student said that since we cannot carry the Jabwala openly to the library to read, we wrap it up in a newspaper, and this is how we sort of smuggle the Jabwala into the library. And at that time, the then principal had adopted a stray dog. And this dog would run all around the college. One day, this dog came to the library. And a girl was mortified because she was scared of dogs. You know, there are people who are very, very scared of dogs. And she just shouted and ran out of the library. Spontaneously, one boy got up and he said, I'm so sorry that the days have come where Jabwala is not allowed, but dogs are allowed in our library. So this was the long and short of my student life in JLC. I got my LLB exam at least, not the Sunday, at the age of 20 and a half, I think. And I suddenly discovered that I was not even eligible for the Sunday. I was underage. Fortunately, there was a rule of the Bar Council that you had to work for 6 months with a lawyer, intern, then take the bar exam, and then the Sanad would be given. So that would fill up the gap. I was happy to see that. But what I was not happy to see was that I didn't know a single lawyer whom I could approach for this 6 months internship. No lawyers in the family, no lawyers in the building, no lawyers. I mean, I just couldn't walk to a lawyer and say, look, I am so and so, please take me for 6 months. My parents were obviously also upset. And my dad had a Sindhi friend who said, you don't worry. I closely know a lawyer in my community, and he's a reasonably good lawyer. I can't promise anything, but I'll speak to him. Just give me 2 days. On the 3rd day, he came to our house. He called me and he said, tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm taking you to my lawyer friend. And please wear a white shirt and a black coat, because if everything goes well, he may ask you to start tomorrow itself. Now, I was so naive and so simple, I think, in those days that I didn't even bother asking him, who is this lawyer from your community? Anyway, next day he picks me up in his car and we go to the building and we see all junior lawyers sitting there and working. Fortunately, I found a classmate of mine. So I said, if I work here, at least I know one person. So then I said, I started talking. I still didn't know the lawyer's name. I started talking to him and I said, where is the big boss? And he pointed out to a big door with a nameplate. Ram Jetmalan. And that is how, by chance, I ended up working with him. He took an interview, but it was hardly an interview because he would ask me one or two questions. He was so busy and so good and famous at that time also, that after asking two questions, he would call one of his juniors and say, oh, be ready for the 12 o'clock cross-examination, and 2 o'clock we've got this case. Then again he would ask me one question, then again call another junior lawyer. And then he finally looked at me as if to say, why are you sitting here or something like that. And he said, oh, you want to join? Okay. Today you join us. Today at 11:30 we have got a very crucial cross-examination. I would like you to attend that. And he called one of his juniors and said, explain the case to him and give him the brief to read. Because if you just go to court and hear the lawyers talking without knowing the background, you understand it. So that's how it started. And to be very honest, he was so busy that I hardly spent time with him, but most of the time I was with his juniors. But I would attend each and every hearing. I mean, he was a phenomenal person. And he was generous enough to tell me that if there is any other case where I'm not involved and you think it is interesting, please go and sit there. Don't come to office, follow that case. And in those days, there were only two top lawyers, criminal lawyers. One was Mr. Jetmalan himself, and the second was a gentleman called Mr. P.R. Vakil. And he was also extremely good. I remember one particular case where Mr. Vakil was appointed as a special prosecutor. And the case involved murder of a girl in the office toilet by her boyfriend. And it was very horrifying when the clothes of the victim, her sari, her blouse, her underwear, totally bloodstained, were shown to the judge. And Mr. Vakil argued so effectively that at the end of the day, this man was sentenced, was given the death sentence. His mother happened to be in the court, and I have very clear memories. She got hysterical. I mean, naturally, her son is being sentenced to death. And she started abusing and cursing Mr. Vakil. And one sentence I remember, she told him, you have deprived me of my son. One day, God will deprive you of your child. I mean, that was not really the correct approach, but that's how it went. And 3 months later, something strange happened. The 6 months internship and the examination got abolished. So we said thank you very much to Mr. Jetmalan. And I said the next 3 years I'm going to spend doing LLM, because we had one LLM, second LLM, part 2. And simultaneously I said I'll prepare for the IAS exam. So this, in short, was my student life at jails.
So is it true that you preferred a career in law over a career in the prestigious civil services?
I don't know why you call it prestigious and why other people also do that. Yes, I did want, I was not satisfied with the LLM. I was not sure whether I wanted to practice law. And I was interested in two things, the IAS career or management. Somehow the management thought skipped out of my mind. And IAS in those days was different. Today, there are some prelims which you have to clear first. Then you go to IAS. You're nothing of that sort. No coaching classes in Bombay. Today, when I ask students, they say, oh, we are going for the judicial service exam and we are going to Delhi. I ask, why to Delhi? Oh, there is some famous class there called Rahul's class. Okay, I don't know who is Mr. Rahul and how good he is, but I'm told that Monday to Sunday they work very, very hard. Yes, we did have general knowledge classes because general knowledge was a full paper. We had general knowledge classes at St. Xavier's, which I joined. And when I got through the written papers, there was the interview. This was the first major interview because when I met Mr. Jetmalani, that was hardly an interview. And to my luck, I was selected. So the third step was the medicals. And I still remember I spent one full day at the JJ hospital. You know, it was a little better than what it is today. But X-ray and ECG and blood tests and height and weight and God knows what all. At this point of, and then the next and the final step would be Masuri for training. At this step, somehow it just didn't fit into my head. And I had no other choice. But the only thing was whether to go for the IAS or not to go. I consulted several senior people. I got conflicting views from them. I also had a word with Dr. Marshall. Dr. Marshall at that time was the librarian of the Bombay University. And he had served in the IAS. So he gave me a pretty clear picture of what happens. And I told him, I remember, that there are two things which I cannot do. I just cannot do, even if I want to. Number one, excuse me for using this phrase, but I cannot do any chamchagi to anybody. And number two, I cannot obey superior orders if they were corrupt, dishonest, unfair, or unjust. But then people said that, look, if you go for the IAS, as you said just now, Shivam, it's a very prestigious thing. And they pointed out that there were two main things which you get. One is power. You get a sense of power you can control, and you get money. My answer was that I have never hankered in my life for power, and I would not want that money, most of which would be under the table. And I told myself that I would hardly last for a few days if I really joined the LLM, sorry, the IAS. But then there was no clear alternative as to what to do. I was not interested in going back for criminal law. Mr. Jetmalani would have happily taken me back. And then one incident happened which changed my whole life. Bombay University has a law department. And the head of the law department at that time was one Dr. P.K. Irani. He later moved to the NUS, National University of Singapore. And Dr. Irani had no chance to teach me because I had taken commercial and constitutional law in the 2 years, whereas he was an expert in international law, which was also one of the options. So once after the exams were over, I went to collect the mark sheet. I just said, I'll say hi to one of my professors, Dr. Sathe, who's written a book on administrative. And when we were chit-chatting, Dr. Sathe said, good, I remembered, Dr. Irani wants to see you. I said, why, something bad has happened or what is it? He said, no, don't worry. You know, you are a Parsi boy and Dr. Irani wants to just see and meet who is this Parsi boy who stood first class first in 11. So he rang up Dr. Irani. He said, yeah, he's free. Just go and say hi to him. And he was a very nice and humble person. And he asked me, what next? And I told him I was glad I could open up, and I told him about my dilemma. And in the usual Parsi language, he is telling me, Dikra IAS karina su karse? What will you benefit by doing IAS? So I said, yeah, that's exactly my problem. And his answer again in typical Parsi language was, Dikra to solicitor ni exam aapni, become a solicitor. I said, I've really not given any thought to anything. So he said, look, a friend of mine is a partner in Multan, and there is a vacancy there. Just go and meet him to sign articles. I said, but I'm not even sure I want to. He said, doesn't matter. Just go and chat with him. And in those days, there were only two top firms, Mullah and Mullah and Crawford Bailey. Mullah and Mullah did not pay any stipend or anything to their article clerks, whereas Crawford Bailey actually charged the article clerks a premium if they wanted to join. Today, of course, there is so much of mushrooming of law firms. Everybody who passes the LLB starts his own law firm. So if his name is Ashok Sharma, it will be Ashok Sharma and Sons or partners. But those days, as I said, these were the two reputed firms. And Mullah would, and the articleship was 2 years, not 3 years as it is now. Mullah and all the other firms would not pay you during the period of your articleship. Whereas in Crawford Bailey, the article clerk had to pay the firm a premium for joining. So anyway, I met this friend of Dr. Irani, and he said, look, there is a vacancy, but not in my department. Another partner who deals in corporate laws. And corporate laws sounded a little interesting to me. So I met that partner also. And he said, yes, there is a vacancy and your qualifications seem to be very good. So let me know if you're interested. But please let me know soon because we have to fill the vacancy. Now, this was the biggest dilemma in my life. Whether to go for Mullah and Mullah or to go to Mussoorie. And believe me, I spent sleepless nights because this would be a lifetime career decision. At times I got so desperate that I said, I'll toss a coin and see what happens. And I had a friend who was a little over smart. He said, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's toss a coin. But let's not make it heads and tails. We'll write on the coin. I said, what are you going to write? He said, what is your first choice of the two? Not first, but which are the two? So I said, Mullah and Mullah. So he said, okay, on one side, we will write M. And what is the other choice? I said, going to Missouri. So he said, on the other side, we'll also write an M. And then you toss the coin, and God will decide where you are going. So I thought and I thought and I thought, and ultimately I said, forget IAS. I won't last there much longer. And I kept arguing with people that, look, other people may be corrupt, other people may do chamchagiri, but I will stick to my principles and I will do what I want, what my conscience is. And they said that you think you can do that? They'll transfer you. And if you continue doing that, they will again transfer you. And your ultimate transfer will be to some godforsaken place like the Ladakh border, where you can stick to your principles, nobody bothers, nobody is there to watch you. So ultimately I said, I think 2 years articleship and then the solicitor's exam would be the best choice. And I said goodbye to IAS and I joined Mullahs, and very soon thereafter I heard that there were some vacancies in JLC for part-time professors. So I applied, and mind you, Dr. Tope was still the principal. So he was my principal as a student, also as a professor. So I think that answers your question. Sure.
Yes, sir. So I was coming to, ask you as to how your journey started at, teaching at GLC. And I actually wanted to ask you that when you deliver lectures on any subject for that matter, contract, law and medicine, etc., you also cover a lot of things which are not strictly in the syllabus. Now, this the students find very, very interesting, but is there any specific reason why you do that, sir?
Yes, I will first answer your second question. See, I don't believe that it is my duty to teach you only what is within the syllabus. I think most of you are intelligent boys and girls. You can do this at home from the books. But to talk about things which are actually going on at that time. For example, the Supreme Court is about to give a judgment in the privacy case, in the right to information, in the homosexuality case. And I tell my students that this is living history. Your children will read about it in the books, hopefully in the Jabwalas. But these things are happening in front of you. So we spend a lot of time discussing ongoing cases in the High Court. I remember I was telling them about a case where Justice Gautam Patel had passed an order. The litigants have a habit of not complying even with the Bombay High Court orders. And this man was furious. There was a trust which had not filed an affidavit despite directions, and the delay was almost 1 year. So he got very upset and he put an amount for each day, calculated it, and it came to 3.5 lakhs. And when I went to class, I said, this boy, everybody is little surprised. Which boy are you talking about? I was talking of Gautam Patel, because to me, he was just a boy in the classroom and a very, very intelligent and good student. I said he has set a very good precedent. 3.5 lakhs for 1 year's delay as costs. People will think twice before they sleep over orders. And I even sent a small message to him, a small SMS, and he replied back also. So I said this is one way in which litigation could get on faster. The trust went in appeal, and this went to two judges of the Bombay High Court itself. They were shocked. 3.5 lakhs as costs in an interim matter. No. We reduce it to 50,000. All the good which this man was trying to do was washed out. And one of the reasons given by the two learned judges was that the trustee who made the affidavit is 70 years old. Now, I don't know if this is to be construed as allowing everybody who is 70 plus to delay matters as long as they want to. The other thing is that we talk in the classroom about things which have nothing to do with law. And I may tell you that I am almost sure the principal would be knowing about this, and I have worked under, I'm not very sure, but 14 or 15 principals, and they have always given me full liberty. So I tell my students that none of the things which we are teaching you makes you a good thinker. There is nothing which allows you to use logic and come to a conclusion. And I said that even when I teach you contracts, maybe I teach you what are the 4 types of voidable contracts. But do you think that any client is going to come to you and say, close the book and give me a list of voidable contracts? He will bring a contract to you and ask you, is this valid? Is this void? Is this voidable? And this is what we don't teach. And therefore, I even give them puzzles, logic puzzles to think about. And we also have a small prize for the student who answers most of these puzzles. And then just to make matters a little light, we also have a few jokes in the classroom. Talking about this, I remember an incident when I was traveling from Delhi to Mumbai, and I normally do not talk to the gentleman or gentlewoman next to me because that's my nature. And there was a gentleman sitting next to me, and when the plane was about to land, he saw that I was making some law notes. Actually, I was doing some correction work for the Jabal. So he said, are you a lawyer? I said, yeah. Said, what's your name? I said, Mr. Pithawalla. The next question was very interesting. Are you related to another Professor Pithawalla who teaches at JLC? So I had to tell him I'm not related, I'm the same person. Oh, he says, my son was your student. And he still, thinks of you and remembers you. And you taught him company law. I was teaching company law for quite some time. And then for some reason, I voluntarily stopped. Now he began a sentence saying that my son still remembers you. And then there was an interruption, I think announcement in the plane or something like that. And thank God, I was going to open my big mouth and say that, yeah, he must be remembering me for the company law which I taught him. Thank God I kept my mouth shut. When the announcement was over, he continued and he said, my son still remembers you for the jokes which you had in your class. Of course, it's not a very nice thing to be remembered for jokes and not for company law. Anyway, I'm sorry you wanted to know about my experience as a teacher. Okay, the one good thing was that there was very little age difference between me and my students when I started teaching. And that really helps in relating you to the students. And what I feel is that a professor should never feel that he is at this level and the students are at this level. In fact, he should come down to this level so that you everybody feels comfortable. And I don't think many people know this. There was no new building, and there was a shortage of one classroom in jails. So we had an arrangement whereby one classroom from Sydenham College was made available for, there was no 5-year course. So for the first year of the 3-year course where I taught contracts. And it happened to be the same division I was teaching. So some of these classes, not some, all of these classes were in the same classroom in Sydenham. Now, this was not a very good thing because you are not in GLC building. But the plus point was that you are away from GLC, everything is quiet, you can have a good class. And right from, yes, I'll tell you very honestly, I was quite nervous. And my biggest fear was, we were very mischievous as students. So I expected a lot of mischief from my students. But I think God has been very kind to me. And over all these 49 years, I teach 2 batches each year. So 98 batches, God has been kind to give me students who are really very, very good. And my biggest fear was that if I turned around to write something on the blackboard and my back is facing the class, would the students do some kind of mischief? Fortunately, nothing of that sort. And right from the very first year that I was teaching, I encourage students to volunteer, come on the stage and take a small topic instead of my teaching the topic. Of course, I would sit with that student and prepare him or her for that. And I would tell him that, look, any other student from the class is going to ask you any question on that point. So please be ready and ask me if you can think of any such question. So there was this boy sitting on the first bench who was a volunteer. And he came on the stage. And I went and sat on the first bench to hear what he was going to discuss. At that very minute, a peon, who was a new peon from GLC, came with a notice Now, the notice would be circulated in all the classrooms of the GLC building and one class here, which was part of the college. Now, what the professor had to do was to read the notice, put his initials, and give it back. Since this boy was on the stage, he extended his hand and offered to read the notice. But the peon would not give it to him. So then I realized that I should do the job. So I was on the first bench and I got up and I extended my hand and he wouldn't give it to me also. And something he muttered in Marathi that if I'm not giving to one student, why should I give it to another? It took the whole class about 3.5 minutes to convince this new peon that I was not a student, and ultimately he handed over the notice. Our class was on the ground floor of Sydenham College, and excellent students, very good students. Just one more incident of that time about a boy who is now a senior counsel in the Bombay High Court. He used to lead life as he pleased, very carefree, but very much interested in law. And on one day, he forgot that he had a class. So he took his dog. He was staying at Marine Drive, very close to the college. He took his dog for a walk. Suddenly, he remembered that he had a class. So he comes running to the class with his dog. And he said, "Excuse me, but I have my dog with me because I was taking him for a walk and I suddenly realized and I have no time to go home and come back. So can you please let me in with my dog?" So the first time that something like this happened, and I said, "Yeah, you can come in, but please make sure the dog does not disturb anybody." He said, "No, no, he's a very nice, quiet dog." And I said, "You please go and sit on the last bench." So he went on the last bench, made the dog sleep on the bench, and I had the unique satisfaction of teaching contracts even to a dog. And I think there are many, many other things which happened. But in short, this is what my experience was as a professor. And I'm so glad that many of my students are now professors at jails. I think that covers your question, sure. Okay.
Yes, sir. In fact, I started myself with your blessings in 2018 itself. And trust me, sir, when you did mention about the gentleman who met you in the flight, I think all the students all of us have been your students, do, miss one thing about GLC, and that is, to come back to your classes. And if we could, I think I'm sure many of them would.
Actually,
And
actually, it
yes, sir.
happened. This is surprising. When the pandemic started, we started online classes. And I was told by the student who organized the Zoom meeting that if you take a paid Zoom, they allow you up to 100 participants. And I said that's much, much more than enough. I don't think so many will turn up. And then when I announced it on my Facebook page, I got emails from, I was taking contract. So that would be the third year of the 5-year course or the first year of the 3-year course. I got emails from senior students who are in the 4th year and 5th year saying, can we attend? You know, just to relive our experiences. Not only that, but past students who had passed out from college 2 years, 4 years, 10 years back, they phoned me and they emailed me, can we please attend your class? So it became a big problem because 122 participants came on that Zoom thing. And fortunately, the student who was the admin, she could manage to take 100 on Zoom, and the balance 22 somehow she managed on YouTube simultaneously. So it's nice to know that people sometimes remember you. I think I have covered
Definitely, sir.
both your questions, or
Yes, sir, absolutely. Sir, so now my next question is about the fact that we do not see a lot of bright, students take up teaching law as a career. In fact, there are different reasons for that, that they don't make teaching law as their priority. Uh, is there any specific reason why you think so?
possibly the same reason as why good and eminent lawyers don't become judges. We do not teach for the sake of money. We do it for the love of it. But the point is that if you become a full time teacher, number one, you are not allowed to practice. And there is a very funny government rule that if you do practice, you must report it to the government and pay the government whatever you received from the client. And I did toy with the idea of becoming a full time teacher. But when I heard that the salary was 16,000 rupees, 1/6, I said I can't keep up a family with this amount. Fortunately, today things are totally different, and our full timers get, some of them, more than a lakh a month. Whether they deserve it or not is a different question. But the point is that some working lawyers and solicitors hesitate to do this because they have conferences before the court hours. They have conferences after the court hours. And if I took up a part time teacher post, I would like to make sure that I don't bunk classes and that I am there. So I think many people find it very difficult to combine the practice even with part time teaching. And just to give you one example, since you asked about it, after Gautam Patel passed from GLC and he was practicing as a counsel, we used to invite him 2 days a week to take lectures on environmental law and one other subject, which I forget. Of course, this was totally honorary, and he made a good job. He was a bit strict with the students, as he is now also strict with litigants and even lawyers. And one thing about him which I still remember was that he was a computer expert. And I think the digital revolution in the Bombay High Court is mainly due to him. Anyway, he did his job, and then there was vacation. And then we had a temporary principal. They are called principal in charge, whose name I would not like to mention. And when the academic year started again, Gautam Patel himself went to the principal instead of the principal approaching him saying, "Do you want me to continue?" And this in charge principal said, "Yeah, what were you taking?" He said, "This particular subject, environmental law, transfer of property, whatever that is." So that fellow looks at the timetable and he says, "Yeah, Tuesdays and Fridays, 11:30. Gautam Patel said, "Look, I am," in his mind, he must have said, "I'm doing you a favor." But he said, "Look, I'm a practicing lawyer and I can't come at 11:30. So what does that in charge principal reply? "Look at the timetable. Tuesdays and Fridays, 11:30. This man got so mad, he said, "I'll never step into the principal's room ever in my life." So this kind of a thing where somebody is doing a favor to you and you don't realize and you don't appreciate, and on the contrary, you want him to come at 11:30 on a court working day, I think it's unthinkable. So this may be the reason why many good lawyers don't take up to teaching. But let me tell you one thing. A good lawyer does not necessarily mean a good teacher. In fact, I remember a particular lawyer who had done his PhD in competition law. And at that time, we had the earlier version of competition law in the form of the MRTP Act. And his thesis was published in a book form. But when given the subject to teach, the students were totally dissatisfied. In fact, you must have heard of D.M. Harish and Company. They instituted a very novel thing. They wanted the students to vote for the best professor. And it started and it continued for one more year. Both the years I got the award, and this raised such a strong feeling of animosity and jealousy. You won't believe, I went to the principal and I said, "Let's stop this system." And there was one lady professor, whom I will not name again because she's still around. She tells the principal in front of me that when the students vote for the best professor, I want to be in that classroom. So the principal said, again, something like Section 16. I mean, why do you want to be around? "No, no, I want to be around so that they remember me and they can see me and they can remember that I am teaching, etc." So, anyway, when I realized that I had become the most unpopular professor amongst the professors, I requested the principal, "Please tell D.M. Harish not to have this anymore." But I think the best way to evaluate a professor are the students. And that should also be anonymous so that the professors don't know who is writing good things or bad things about them.
Sir, so my next question is about the online medium of education, which has been pushed because of COVID-19. I'm so happy that you are also taking, lectures online now. Do you think that the online medium is here to stay?
I am not very sure about that. That depends on whether COVID-19 is here to stay. Now, you may be happy that I'm taking online lectures, but believe me, I am not so happy. Because in online lectures, you lose the personal touch. Secondly, I think the Zoom on which I was taking classes shows only about 12 people on the first page. So if you want to see people who are on the other page, you have to change the page and then you can't see the first 12 people. And people are not, I think, I don't know how to put it, but what I don't like is that sometimes I say something and I like to see the physical reaction of the students and the spontaneous physical reaction is important to me. Some of them may laugh, some of them may say, oh, some of them. And all this is not possible because their mics are generally muted. In fact, talking about spontaneous reaction, I remember one small thing. I met 3 students who were in Rizvi College doing the 5-year course, and they came to GLC for the 3rd year, knowing and hoping that it would be a better place. And after spending 1 year in GLC, do you know what happened? They went back to Rizvi College. Now, when I was telling this to one class, I was midway when I said 3 students left Rizvi College and came to GLC. And this girl, I think, was also earlier in Rizvi. So when I said that they left Rizvi and came to GLC, spontaneously one girl exclaimed, "वो पागल हो गए थे क्या?" This was a reaction. Now these things are not possible in an online class. So when you don't have the personal touch, when you can't see all the people at the same time, but I think this is the second best, and we only hope that the pandemic ends soon and we are able to resume classes, but I don't think this will happen in the short future.
So, and what are your views on the online exams, which have now become a norm?
I was hoping you would not ask that question because I have very, very strong views. And believe me, I think this is one big farce. I have seen students getting 100 out of 100 in subjects like evidence, arbitration. At that time, there were only the objective type questions. Now I think they introduced some descriptive questions also. Now this makes the students very happy and excited. Oh, I got 100 out of 100. But what I tell them is that, look, when you go to your employer and you are facing a lawyer for an interview, and he sees that you have 100 out of 100 in Evidence Act, he will start laughing. In normal circumstances, it is difficult to get even 65 or 70 in the Evidence Act. And this means that you know everything A to Z of the Evidence Act. And if you ever apply to a foreign university to do the LLM, what are those people going to think? Here is a university where in law you can get 100 out of 100. I mean, this was absurd. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to tell is something which I find really shocking. I have spoken, I have no first-hand experience, but I have spoken to many, many students on this point after their exams. Just before the exams, there's some kind of a presentation, not from JLC, but from some technical people who are conducting the exams. And they had issued all false warnings to the student. They said you have to look straight into the computer, and if we find that you're looking down at your book or something, and this happens more than 3 times, you will be disqualified. And surprisingly, this was not enforced at all. So what can happen is that you have your evidence book in front of you. You see the question, you look at the book, give the answer. I mean, what kind of an examination is this? Some people said that if the question was not to be found in the textbook, they had a mobile. They could Yahoo or search for a Google answer. And there was absolutely no monitoring. Because see, one student is in Agra, one is in Bhopal, one is in Ranchi, one is in Pune, one is in Ahmedabad, sitting in the comfort of their own homes and logging in. But this is not the end of the story. There is no guarantee that the person who is answering and sitting in front of the computer is the student. So it's very easy to call my neighbor, who is a lawyer with 10 years experience, or perhaps call my uncle, who is a judge, and ask him to answer my question. There is no way in which the computer recognizes the face and compares it with some identity which it has. I am told that the university has left this part of the online exams to each college, and each college can do what they want. So I'm not, for a minute, I hope I'm not giving ideas to people. But I cannot stand, my blood boils. I cannot stand the idea that a paper who, let's say Shivam is the student, and he is supposed to answer it, is being answered by his elder brother who is a lawyer, or by even a law professor. You might call me to your house and sit in front of the computer. And whatever answers I give will be the marks which you will get. I mean, this is a total farce. If somebody goes to the High Court with this, I'm sure all, which would not be a good thing for the students, all the results, I think, would be quashed. So I'm not a computer expert, but I'm told that there are ways of monitoring, but then that is very expensive. And somebody said you need 2 more cameras, possibly 2 more mobiles, which will monitor you and make sure that you don't open any books, You don't cheat. In fact, I'm surprised to see that in normal exams, 3 years back, 4 years back, normal exams held, university exams held in GLC, so many people were cheating. Now imagine if a law student starts cheating at his exams. I don't have to tell you what kind of lawyer he will make. So I don't have a solution, but this, I think, cannot continue.
No, thank you, sir, for offering your candid views on the subject. And I'm sure that the students will be listening to your words very carefully. Um, my next question was that, firstly, Government Law College, the placement cell, has been privileged to have you as the faculty in charge. And you're also the faculty advisor for the magazine committee, for the Social Service League. So, how important, sir, do you think it is for students to get involved in, college committees and also be involved in co-scholastic activities at large?
Very important, I would say, because what we want is an all-rounder and not a student who will get very good marks at the exams because he crams up from the Jabala or elsewhere. And these things help you to really build up and realize the talents that you have. Take the placement committee. There was a time when there was no placement committee. We started this committee, I'm not sure, but about 23 years ago. And why did we start it? Because we found that students had no lawyers in their families. They didn't know any lawyers and they had no way of approaching a lawyer. So this sounded like a good idea that the law firms and lawyers would post their requirements to us. Our students would apply and GLC would be the link between the two. So that's how the placement committee started. The magazine committee is also important. And I believe that even if a person has not seen a particular college or never been to that particular college, he can get a very good idea of the college by just looking at the college magazine. The standard of that magazine will be the standard of the college. So I would encourage, and I know people in placement committee, in the moot court committee, and other magazine committee, who have worked till 10 and 11 in the night because everything is time bound and things have to be completed. But I always give a warning to all students that let this and let not your interaction with a firm come in the way of your academic results. I have seen students working in law firms. They make you sit till 11 and 11:30 in the night. Okay, they give you 250 rupees for dinner and they arrange a taxi for you. Next morning, you are so exhausted that you skip your classes and then again you have to report to work. And these students could easily have got a first class, but for this kind of thing. In our days, we never had this. In Mullah and Mullah, whole office would close at 6. 6. It would be empty, lights off. And sometimes when we had to sit till 7, we would grumble about it. Arey, why are we sitting so late, etc. But now it has become a fad for large offices to keep you till 11 and 12. And mind you, sometimes when there is no workers. and there is no urgency. But it is happening. So I tell people to take as much part as possible, but not to sacrifice your academic record. Because work will come and work will go. But the academic record stays with you forever.
Thank you, sir. The other issue that I wanted to discuss with you is of mental health. And we see that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, students are really unsure about things, whether it's their classes, exams, or placements. What do you think they can do at this time to boost their mental health and well-being?
I was also very much interested in this topic, and I started looking at researches done by various American universities. In fact, right now I'm in USA. So these researchers have concluded that the situation has led to a lot of mental problems, anxiety, depression. Surprisingly, it has also led to hair loss, dental problems, and again, surprisingly, skin problems by wearing the mask all day. They have reported rash, allergies, and acne in people using their mask. Now you are not allowed to go out, so it's a very difficult situation. But I would say that continue to try and do whatever you were doing earlier, despite the lockdown. I'll just give you my own example. In the normal times, I used to regularly go to a gym, which is very close to college in the Eros Theatre building, which has now closed down. So I have some weights at home and I can do almost the same exercises indoors. You can do running, and if you have a treadmill, you can go on a treadmill. So try to keep up the routine. But the other bad thing is that if your family member is down with COVID, you cannot be with him or her. And this again causes a lot of mental stress. So we hope that the situation gets better, but surely there will be many, many more cases of anxiety and depression because of this.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, are there any parting words of wisdom for our budding lawyers?
Parting words of wisdom, yes, I can give you parting words, but whether they are wisdom or otherwise, you have to decide. And this is what I have told many students at the farewell function for the final year students, or if I'm not able to attend, then in the classroom. I tell them that ethics and morals amongst lawyers has seen a big downfall. And in one class, I made a mention that my primary aim is not to make you a good lawyer. And one girl got terrified and upset, and she got up and said, then what is your primary aim? I said, my primary aim is to make you a good person. And there is so much lack of ethics in the legal field. I'm not saying all, but there are many who are spoiling the name of the legal profession. When I was asked to address a group of students and lawyers on professional ethics, one gentleman got up and said that why don't we have this as part of the syllabus for the LLB? And my answer was that maybe one reason is that it does not exist. And I tell students that you will have ample opportunities where somebody approaches you and you can make a fast buck in 2 minutes and you're not even likely to get caught. And in return, you will get something which you cannot earn officially for 2 years. But the first time is the time when you should reject such a thing. And if you have the strength to do it, the second time will be much easier. And perhaps nobody will approach you the third and the fourth time. But if you succumb to this temptation, then human greed is always there. And you tell yourself, oh, I made 1 lakh in 2 minutes. I think I can make 2 lakhs also. And then you lose your reputation. I don't know how these people can sleep at night. And we must try and bring back the glory of the legal profession because it is supposed to be a learned profession and not a commercial one. So therefore, let's be honest, whatever the other people may be. I said, each one of you individually can make a change.
Thank you so much, sir. Uh, I can't tell you how happy I am that you took out time despite your busy schedule, despite the time differences, and you agreed to do this. And I'm sure that, as I said in the beginning, this will fulfill the purpose of inspiring our budding lawyers,
Well,
not
I
just
hope
to strive
so.
for
I hope
Sorry.
so. And it is
Yes,
always
sir.
a privilege and an honor. And I think it is also a moral duty to make yourself available to students so they can be better persons, better lawyers, better human beings. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, sir.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you.